Welcome to Khanversations. I'm Muqtedar Khan, your host, and today I'm going to talk to you about a very interesting set of articles published in The Economist, the latest issue of The Economist. I think it is the cover, obviously, story. They are basically arguing that what has happened to American politics is the Trumpification of American policy. So both the domestic as well as American foreign policy have both become so influenced by the Trump phenomena and Trump. I mean, I can't even use the word Trump ideas, but Trump's ideology and Trump's point of view, basically extreme right-wing populist ideas, that there's little to choose when it comes to domestic politics or foreign policy between Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. They even go even beyond and saying there's so little discussion of policy. They argue that Kamala Harris is vague in her plans. There's no clarity, and Trump, well, it's totally bizarre. Whatever Trump says is out there. But they provide about 8 policy briefs where they look at the policies of both the candidates on taxation, on domestic policy, on the environment, on foreign policy in the Middle East, on China, etc. So I like the idea, and I potentially also agree with this, that there has been a Trumpification of American politics and American policy. But I kind of disagree with their take on foreign policy, particularly in the Middle East. And this is what I will focus on in this conversation. But before that, please subscribe to Khanversation, like this video, press the bell icon, and don't forget to share this video with your socio-political network. So I want to read a couple of short passages from The Economist, which really gives some context to what they're trying to say. They say, for example, take Ms. Harris' domestic platform. Her immigration policy is to endorse the most conservative bipartisan reform proposal this century. Its provisions include shutting down asylum applications when the flow of irregular migrants is high. Her trade policy involves keeping, in modified form, most of the tariffs Mr. Trump imposed in his first term. On tax, Ms. Harris would keep most of the cuts Mr. Trump signed in 2017, raising rates only for those who earn over $400,000 per year. On energy, she has become a convert to fracking and has been part of an administration that has seen America pump more oil and gas than ever before. Because America is so partisan and Mr. Trump is such a polarizing figure, Ms. Harris has been able to borrow parts of Mr. Trump's first-term agenda without most people noticing. Well, a lot of people have noticed that. I'm one of them. In fact, I even anticipated it, and I will tell you soon about it. The other quote that I wanted to read from their article, which is very, very interesting, this is what they say. Yet the result is that a candidate. So the point they're trying to say is that we are getting carried away with cultural issues, and the debates are around cultural issues. But on policy, they seem to be converging, especially because both are fighting so hard to win Michigan and some of the swing states like Pennsylvania and Minnesota and Wisconsin. So they say, yet the result is that a candidate who lost the last election, which is Trump in 2020, that a candidate who lost the last election, whose party was trounced in the 2018 midterms, a candidate who has never won the popular vote and probably never will, has remade American policy in his image. It's a very, very powerful indictment of the Democrats and their lack of ideas, or the political trend in this country. Let me read it out to you again. Yet the result is that a candidate who has lost the last election, whose party was trounced in the 2018 midterms, a candidate who has never won the popular vote and probably never will, has remade American policy in his image. So this is what they're saying is the Trumpification of America, by identifying many policies of Kamala Harris, which are more or less modifications or direct borrowing of Donald Trump's policies. So they come up with 8 policy briefs, and you can see the list here. They are trade, tax, immigration, energy and environment, defense spending, Ukraine, the Middle East, and China. So there are about 4 national security / foreign policy and 4 domestic policy issues. So the points that I want to make is this, that the economists and the policy briefs, they're very badly written. The foreign policy briefs are really badly written. If any of my grad students wrote a brief like that, I would give them a C. They would be out of the program then. So especially the one on the Middle East is really terrible. They predict that Kamala Harris will follow Biden on foreign policy, both in Ukraine and the Middle East. They call Biden foreign policy, which is support for a genocidal war and endless support with no restraints, complete autonomy, complete support for everything that Netanyahu does. They call that as an awkward policy. And so they say that Kamala Harris is going to basically do what Biden has done when it comes to Ukraine and the Middle East. And she will also remain just as hawkish on China. The only difference that they see between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump is on Ukraine. They think that she will be as supportive of Ukraine as Joe Biden was. But they also, and that's where they see that Trump, who has signaled that he might be not as supportive of Ukraine, but they also kind of hedge on that by saying, we're not really very clear what Trump will do on Ukraine. It's quite possible that he may realize that surrendering to all of Putin's demands when it comes to Ukraine, compelling Ukraine to concede territory to Russia, may make him look weak, and therefore he may not depart too far away from the Biden-Ukraine policy. But that is their speculation. Really, it's anybody's guess what Donald Trump will do about anything at all. But in an article that was published after Donald Trump was elected for the Khanversation, I made some predictions about Joe Biden's foreign policy. And basically, I had made an argument that it's going to be no different from Trump's foreign policy. And let me go through those 7 items as far as 6 items with regards to the Middle East and South Asia. I don't make any predictions about Europe and Africa. So number 1, Donald Trump, in his national security strategy, which was published sometime in 2017, it's still there. If you Google the White House and Donald Trump's national security strategy, the document will pop up. In that, he basically reconstitutes Obama's pivot to Asia into an Indo-Pacific strategy, basically saying that Indo-Pacific is threatened by China's rise, China's navy, and on the pretext of keeping the Indo-Pacific open for trade and protect the countries in that region which are being bullied by China, the United States will essentially play a bigger military, economic, diplomatic, and political role in the region, basically to contain China and push it back. The reason why I argue is that keeping it free is a pretext is because the biggest beneficiary of trade through the Indo-Pacific region is China. So why will China close it down since it is the biggest beneficiary of that? So claiming that we are there to keep it open for free trade is kind of moronic, really. But we are there to contain China, and that's what it is. And the Biden administration has hesitated to use the word. I think Donald Trump, if he gets elected, might decide that why shy? And he would probably say we have to push China back. So there has been actually no change at all on the Indo-Pacific issue between Biden and Trump. He just doubled down on what Trump was doing. In fact, if you look at the Quad and the relationship with India, no difference. I can share photographs with you with Trump and Narendra Modi hugging each other. Trump going to Gujarat when Narendra Modi was prime minister, Biden hugging him, inviting him to his house in Wilmington, etc. Just identical behavior. When you look at China, for example, the tariffs that Donald Trump imposed, Joe Biden kept all of them. Not only that, but he has also increased on it, especially when it comes to electric vehicles. So the trade policy towards China has been similar. If you look at the JCPOA, which Donald Trump pulled out of, and Joe Biden promised that he would go back and restore JCPOA, which was the a nuclear agreement with Iran, a non-proliferation agreement. Biden did nothing about it. You can continue to blame Iran as much as you like, but Iran was in it. Iran was fulfilling all its obligations according to that particular agreement. European nations who are part of it have testified to it, and even the US intelligence agencies more or less said Iran did not violate the JCPOA. It was the United States under Trump which unilaterally pulled out of JCPOA. And Biden said so many times during the campaign, promising that he would get back into JCPOA, maybe strengthen it, but nothing happened. So basically, his policy on Iran has been more or less very similar. When it comes to Jerusalem, Trump moved the US embassy to Jerusalem from Tel Aviv. Biden did nothing. Same policy, adopted it. Aid to Palestinians is one small change that Joe Biden did make. And it is such a small amount, it's so insignificant that I guess Biden must have felt good. Okay, finally, I have found a way to look different from Donald Trump and justify my image as Mr. Empathy. But when it comes to settlements in the West Bank, Joe Biden and Donald Trump, the same thing. Donald Trump did not really care about what the Israelis really did, gave them complete carte blanche to do whatever they wanted. Biden merely talked about it, but did absolutely nothing to prevent settlements being expanded in West Bank while he was president. The point is that in the past few years, especially under Joe Biden and now with Kamala Harris's campaign, it appears that the Democrats talk differently about issues, but will probably act exactly the same. So what is the choice going into November? There is no difference, at least in foreign policy, and as the article also argues, on many issues such as taxation, one of the most important issues as immigration. If they are going to be roughly the same on all of these issues, then why are we even bothering to vote for one or the other candidate? It's just because of how they talk, how they look. This is a crisis of American politics. This is a crisis of American democracy. And this election is not just about what happens to American democracy, it's also about what has happened to American politics already. So you could argue in a positive way that, well, there are certain policies which are independent of political parties. When the US has no choice but to take to make these policies on these issues, and it doesn't matter who comes to power. And so let's pick people who are nice as opposed to people who are not nice. And that is an important thing to keep in mind, that substantively, going into this election, keep it in mind that substantively, Kamala Harris is not going to be any different from Donald Trump, at least in the Middle East. I can give you a guarantee of that. At least in the Middle East, she's not going to be any different. If there was going to be any difference, you could have seen that at the Democratic Convention in Chicago. No Palestinian American was allowed to speak there, not even those who were in the Congress. Rashida Tlaib did not speak there, and there were efforts by many Palestinian Americans. This is Kamala Harris. How was it different from Donald Trump or the Republicans? So I'm going to stop with that. It's an interesting idea, and I agree broadly with what the Economist is arguing, but I found their policy briefs, especially on the Middle East, really wanting and inadequate. But nevertheless, I agree with the broad point that they are trying to make, that indeed we are experiencing a Trumpification of American policies, both international and domestic. So I hope you found this conversation interesting, thought-provoking, worrisome too. and do subscribe to the channel. Please like this video, press the bell icon. Don't forget to share it with your socio-political network. And until next time, I'm your host, Muqtedar Khan. Take care.